Perfect.
Okay. There we go. So, it's been a while since I did one of these. It's been a while since I did a whole discussion on Discord. What's it been? I forget what the exact last time I did one of these is. I think
it was a couple years ago, 2020.
Around episode 125, if I recall.
Wow, I listened to the last one. It was fantastic.
You did listen to the last one. Well,
yeah, recently.
Yeah, I figured that was a good spot to stop because, I don't know, there weren't many people asking questions or I guess my output as far as comics go, it kind of slowed down at that point. Doing one each week, it kind of slowed the process down. And since then, I've gotten much more back into comics, which is what I want to make to begin with.
Right.
So I've been making some great comics in the years between, which is good.
Well, I was trying to catch up and see. So it seems like when we last talked, you were doing mail order comics, and that was like your main thing. But it sounds like between 2020 and now, you have done some music too.
Yeah, I feel like, well, oftentimes something will overshadow the comics. I really want to make sure that comics remain what people know me the most for, because they are an immensely gratifying medium to engage with, and I'm really good at them. But I know that many people consider my early stuff like College Buddies not to be of such great quality, and I can concede that it's somewhat dated. But my current stuff is really, really good, and I hope that most people still associate me with comics. Like, at all the shows I've gone to, all the music I've played, I always sell my comics there, and I try and kind of nudge people over in that direction. Hey, my comics are really like the main thing. And I've tried to integrate them together. I've put my tapes into the Nicholas Comics catalog. I've put a lot of my music writing and music journalism into the Nicholas Comics catalog, so people can buy both. But I feel like I've kind of gotten away from my roots, and I want to make some more comics. So this year we'll see some interesting releases. But it is mainly comics are a very effort-intensive type medium. It takes more to draw comics. It takes more dedication to draw comics than it does to record music, hence why there are less cartoonists than musicians. But yeah. Since the last episode of the Nicholas Comics Q&A, which was around about 2023 or so, 2022, something like that, not only have I started making music, I've made a lot of music. I've made about, 15 albums or so. Some of them probably overlap with the Q&A a little bit. I've also been credited with Hypnagogic Archive, which was big. That was big about, year and a half ago, and I'm still going with it. This year I plan on putting out a brand new 5-story Hypnagogic Archive comic anthology called Tales from the Hypnagogic Archive. There's already been one, but this will be the second one. And that was a big thing. That was very exciting. So, yeah, that happened after the Q&A ended.
That's fantastic, yeah. Archive. Well, it sounds like you have some direction on where you're wanting to go creatively in the next bit, but it also seemed like in a couple of your recent videos that you were feeling kind of discouraged generally, or just tired.
Goes,
okay.
Well, as far as music goes, in terms of music, the music has not been going so great. Well, like I say, comics and music take different levels of exertion. Comics are exerting in the sense that you have to sit down alone and you have to really commit yourself to filling up an entire sheet of paper, multiple entire sheets of paper with images and words. Music is one can more easily overexert themselves in music, I imagine, if one is autistic. But I went for music because it's a very accessible and popular, and it's one of the only mediums, especially in Denver currently, that someone can succeed in. Especially like 2 years ago. Not even so much anymore, but around 2 years ago, music seemed like a very accessible and easy type of thing to get into. Because the market is never too oversaturated here at any given point in time, especially not now, but not really back then either. And it seemed like there was a relatively low barrier to entry, so I hopped in and went for it. But as of late, yes, it's been very tiring. Which, I can imagine. And tiring in a completely different way than comics are tiring.
In what, I guess, can you tell me more about, like, what makes, or what really kind of burned you out in the Denver music scene?
Well, I've often said this, but music requires a sense of conviction. It requires, like, the best music is by people who actually seem to care about music for music's sake. I guess that can be said for all kinds of art, in that art isn't good if the people who are making it aren't sincere about their legitimate enjoyment of art. And it's the same with music. And I think many people can tell whether or not an artist does legitimately enjoy making art. So, in my case, I do enjoy making music. I actually ended up making new wave music. I'm not sure exactly why I gravitated towards that. I think new wave music is great. It's not something I particularly listened to before about 5 years ago, but once I got into it, I was huge into new wave music. I thought, this is some great music, and I enjoy playing it. Not only do I enjoy listening to all the classics in this genre, but I enjoy making it, like I legitimately enjoy making it. So I got a Casio MT68 keyboard, which is from 1983. So it's a period-specific model, and it has fantastic sound quality. It's really good.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I saw 5:30. Was 5:30 in the morning one of your new wave tracks? I guess.
Yeah,
you were
that's
performing
one
live.
of them. That's off my newest album, Turquoise Delusion. But like I said, in the years since Q&A, I've made about 12 different albums, maybe 15. Five or so of which are available on tape. I'll probably put out more tape releases soon. That's off Turquoise Delusion.
Where'd you come up with that? Album. Yeah, where'd you come up with that? I love that title. Where did that come from?
Well, the song's about this girl who stays up late. She's like an insomniac, and the lyric, it's kind of like it's in the tradition of like You Can Call Me Al, or one of those type songs. I like those songs that have a very cheery type sound on the surface, but then they're about very deep existential topics.
Awesome.
Not that You Can Call Me Al is new wave, but I like the subtext. I like music with subtext. I like music with a lot of layers to it. So 5:30 in the morning is about this girl who's an insomniac, and she feels so rejected by the world that she ends up going onto the train tracks. And then I have a song, probably my darkest song, is called Medicine Cabinet, and that's a song about serious domestic abuse. I was to kind of draw light to that issue, and I forget what album that one's on. In terms of dark music, though, I don't generally. Like I say, I'm interested in music that sounds fun, but it has a deeper layer to it. And a lot of new wave is like that. A lot of new wave is deceptively fun, but has a sort of kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, a deeper intellectual bent to it.
Right.
So that was the idea behind 5:30 in the morning. Not the entire Turquoise Delusion album. It's kind of a concept album. I like all my albums to be kind of concept albums where each song has an individual thing going on, but also they make sense when listened to as a whole. And pretty much all my albums since, what was it? Rules for... no, like Smooth Millennium Cracker or thereabout. Actually, no. Since Dial Up Delirium have been 22 tracks each, because that's what it takes to fill up a tape. And if I want to release it on tape, I want it to be tape length. Mm-hmm. So 11 songs per side, about 45 minutes per side. And Turquoise Delusion, the concept behind Turquoise Delusion is it's a sort of, with each of my albums I try and not only make it new wave, but I try and bring in some other genre. With Turquoise Delusion, it's kind of like world music, especially with Desert Voyage, and the concept behind it is sort of a Lawrence of Arabia type bent, not only in terms of the Sahara, but also in terms of the southwestern type American desert, which I had the interesting experience of engaging with recently when I walked all the way from Pueblo to Canyon City and back. And it was beautiful. It's a fantastic landscape out there, and it's pretty cool. I like the southwestern desert type landscape a lot.
How long? Do you know how many miles that walk was round trip?
That's 80 miles. I was going because there was a concert I wanted to go to that was this local singer I knew, and then once I got there, I asked, drive me back to Pueblo, and then she's like, no. My boyfriend's here. We're going to spend the night. So I just walked back to Pueblo from Canyon City. But it was a nice walk. It was by night, and I got to walk by this factory and all.
It's awesome.
Got to walk by some cattle ranches. It's a very existential type landscape. But it's pretty cool.
Yeah, actually,
I like it a lot.
One of my favorite things about the videos you've done recently is that you're walking outside while you're talking about however you're feeling about stuff, because I feel like so many times you see people like sitting in a car talking or ranting or talking about whatever their feelings are, but I feel like walking is massively underrated, and I think that's like not a subliminal message, but like it's just another message in your videos that sort of tells people like you should be outside walking right now.
Well, I don't have a car, so I can't really do that. I mean, that's more convenient for, like, food blogs like Joey's World Tour or whatever. And also I find that generally my thoughts tend to flow a little easier when my legs are moving. Just like shower or whatever. When you have a certain activity going on, it tends to increase thoughts per second. Not that it's particularly sunny or the air is particularly good out, because it's the middle of winter in Denver right now, but come summer it'll perk up a bit.
Well, I just it just made me think more about like how great it is to be able to think while you're moving.
Yeah, I suppose. At any rate, like you ask about what burned me out in terms of music, I realize that there is no market demand for new wave music locally. There really isn't. There's a lot of demand for country type music, and there's a lot of demand for metal, but there doesn't seem to be any demand for new wave. Very few people appreciate the new wave canon. I think new wave, even in its initial run, was highly dismissed. History kind of comes full circle, because back in the day, I made those songs that were kind of a roast of Bill Wirtz, and now I play the piano. And those I say don't play the piano, but now I do. I don't play any other instruments, though. He can play like 20, 25 different instruments. But he has a lot less output, though, too. And, I have a lot less of an audience. So
I think there's different ways
to classify his stuff.
I don't think
I suppose.
I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do it, and I think that you remind me a lot more of Matt Farley than I can see Bill Wirtz in you too, but I think that you have this like massive outflow of creative work, and I think one of the things that I wanted to like express to you, especially in when I had the opportunity to was just to tell you, like, as a person who is 20 years down the road from where you're at, a lot of the things that are frustrating to you were also frustrating to me, were also frustrating to my friends, and we saw the world very similarly. And I've sent a lot of your things, the things that you had to say about creative work, about society, about asexuality, which I am not asexual, but a lot of my best friends are, and it really resonated, and we see a lot of ourselves in you. And so I want you to know that there's definitely a place for your view of the world and all the things that you're creating. It doesn't always get the audience right away, but that's true actually of both Matt Farley and Bill Wirtz. Both of them created a lot of content for a very long time before they ended up getting any type of audience. But that's
true. You compared me to Matt Farley previously 5 years ago, didn't you?
Well, it's another person.
I've been compared to Matt Farley once.
Yeah. Well, it's somebody who's created a massive, massive amount of output.
Right. I've heard Daniel Jansen. I've heard Jack Stauber.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, really, I suppose at this point I have as much output as any new wave band. I mean, I have as many albums as the B-52s have put out.
Mm-hmm.
Then again, I think I'm going to stick with it. I'm not going to necessarily stop playing all live music. I can't really play into the sensibilities and market demands of paid shows, but open mics I can definitely get behind. I think those are a very useful resource locally.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very helpful to people who want a free, easy way to share their art with other people. Mm-hmm. And you have to be very sincere to want to share your art with other people on a regular basis. It's a very vulnerable type of thing, and I admire anyone who does it, especially at something like an open mic.
Absolutely.
But there are lots of bands I see that go to an open mic once and then only do paid shows from then on out, and never really considered that an open mic can be a great way to draw people to the paid shows, have them get to the paid shows. And you can be selfless with music, and you can just go out and do it. You don't need to charge $15 a pop just for people to get in. I mean, open mics are a great and wonderful resource, but a lot of the best ones around Denver are shutting down due to external market forces, and I think this is extremely sad. Mm-hmm. Denver is in a unique position because it's a city that doesn't know how to run itself. And Matt Farley, Bill Wirtz, like you say, they made music for a long time. And I have no doubt that if I keep at it, eventually at least one of my things will be successful through some bizarre algorithmic stroke of luck.
Yep.
But they're both from the East Coast. And what happens with the East Coast, or the West Coast for that matter, is there's lots of different cities with lots of different and unique perspectives on things. And so you can be in like Boston, and you can head up to New York, and you can get resources up in New York, and you can get some people from New York to go to your show in Boston, and you can tell people, hey, I'm from Boston, you can come from New York, because that's a reasonable distance to expect people to travel for your music. But Denver is 1,000 miles away from any other concentrated center of population. So what tends to happen in Denver is everyone succumbs to a kind of homogeneous group thought, and there isn't really an opportunity to get a second opinion in or take influence from somewhere else. And any time any influence from somewhere else is brought into Denver, it's a very diluted and lesser type version of it. And also, Denver has no idea how to embrace its own strengths and culture, despite being 150 plus years old. It doesn't seem to want to celebrate or value its own identity any. It just takes from other places It doesn't consider that a city that's 150 plus years old has plenty of culture and a storied history unto itself, and that Denverite can be an identity in the same way that New Yorker or Los Angelino can be. Mm-hmm. And as a fifth-generation Coloradan, I fully acknowledge that it can. And I love Denver. I love the city. I probably love this city like way too much, but I want to give to it, and I want to make sure that it has a good amount of culture and a healthy artistic ecosystem, and that's not exactly what I'm seeing currently, because every local bookstore is closing down, every local music venue is closing down. The real estate developers have no idea how to manage it. The infrastructure is falling to pieces, and overall it's just a very sad state of things. Denver has it rough. The economy's a shambles, and the artists, in particular, the art sector is being hit pretty hard because it doesn't really yield too much result. But I'm going to stick around here because there's nowhere else I really even would like, and I think, I think Denver will probably eventually recover from the state it's currently in. It just happens to be a sort of cyclical history that goes up and down every couple of years. But Denver really should kind of embrace its own heritage and its own place in American history, and say, you know, Denver is a legitimate place that deserves to be taken as such, and has its own things going on. Like, that's obvious to me that Denver has its own culture, but a lot of people never see it because they're not here for long enough. And I've been here my entire life, so I see it.
I think that's wonderful to have a place that you feel like is worth saving, and being a part of, and being a part of the salvation of Denver. And I think that you're incredibly valuable to everything that makes a city worth going to is something that something that you can't get in another place. Like, there's not going to be another. Do I pronounce your name Nick Cicada? Is that right?
Yeah, sure. Like the insect, yeah.
Okay. There's not another Nick Cicada. Like, there's not another one of you, and I've been all over the country. I haven't seen someone doing what you're doing. Yeah. I can compare style or like effort, like the style of work ethic or amount of effort or something like that to other people, but you're doing something very unique, and so any place that you decide that you want to kind of embrace is very lucky to have you. So I'm excited to see, and it sounds like Denver did embrace you to some extent, but it sounds like what you're saying is there's a lot of things that are just kind of shutting down. There's less opportunity than there was.
Yeah, it's very sad. A lot of the great venues have been sold to people who don't know how to properly manage them, and not enough people are invested in this. I find that a lot of people are sort of ignoring it. Maybe they don't understand how historic and important these type venues are. Mm-hmm. Mainly it's because a lot of the money that comes into Denver isn't necessarily from here. Denver has a difficult time creating a self-sustaining internal type economy. We rely too much on like outside funds, which doesn't make much sense because we do have a mint here, so it's not like it's especially hard for us to create something like that. We should have a stable civic type infrastructure, and we should absolutely invest way more funds in art, but for whatever reason, we don't. A lot of it is privately owned. The big story this year, or mostly last year, because it's probably going to be over soon, is the Mercury Cafe, which has been around since the 70s. It was a hot spot for Denver culture back in the day. I have no way of knowing this because I'm on the young end, and a lot of older Denverites seem to really hold it in high regard. Like, wow, back in the day, this was a happening spot. There were tons of shows here. It was a great resource for artists. And during COVID time, about 2021, it was sold to this guy named Danny Newman. And this guy doesn't know anything about running a business. He's like grew up skateboarding. He's completely entitled. He thinks that owning a business just entitles him to people coming to his business. Like, he doesn't have to advertise. He doesn't have to make his businesses sound appealing. And he also assumes that applying the same techniques that would get a California nightclub, say, ahead would necessarily get, like, this very, like, small-scale vegan cafe in Denver ahead, which isn't the case at all. Like, they're very different scenarios, and you can't apply the same methods to a Denver business that you would to a California-type business, because it's two different places and two different contexts. But besides that, he doesn't know how to advertise the places he owns. He doesn't know how to pay his workers. He fired like 20 of his workers just on the spot. No notice, no leave. And I think that's a really scummy thing to do, is to buy up a business, to assume that it's just going to automatically make money, that you don't have to be a charismatic or interesting business, that it's just going to fix itself, and that people are going to keep going to it even when you seem to intentionally drive it into the ground, or you just want to buy it up and sell it for more than you paid. So he fired like 20 of his workers, the entire kitchen staff. He fires every single chef, every bartender, every waitress, and then he just expects everyone to be all right with that. They weren't all right with it. They formed a union to call out his completely bonkers, abusive practices that no one else in any city across the country could get away with. Mm-hmm. Like in New York, if someone just buys up a restaurant and then fires half the staff, they're going to have something to say. But in Denver, generally nobody complains about terrible abuses of labor practices like this. So you assume that would be the case, but it wasn't. They raised a fuss, and luckily I was made aware of it. At the time, I was going to the open mic there, and I was kind of ready to maybe start hosting the open mic, which would have been the first time that anywhere has ever paid me for anything on a consistent basis. And I figured I could be a pretty good open mic host, because considering my local celebrity status, and I could draw some traffic to this spot, and maybe get it going. Maybe get people to go to it. Mm-hmm. But after I heard that like 20 people are fired with zero notice, and their entire livelihood is just, like, some of them work there for like 20 years. That's awful. And they just get fired like in a day. Mm-hmm. I'm like, if you can't pay a kitchen staff to cook your desserts and drinks for you and stuff, like, you don't need an open mic. You need to worry about, paying your basic workers before you can worry about, like, frivolous stuff like an open mic or whatever. Yeah, that's just the facts of it. Like, I don't need it as much as necessarily like a waitress might. So that's a noble cause I got behind. I said, I'm not going to this place until these workers are rehired, or at least they're communicated with in some capacity. Mm-hmm. I stand with the union, because I think that's an important thing to do, especially for the formation of a healthy and functional economy. But I didn't see any of the other bands locally do this. I saw all of the artists side with the owners, and this is weird, because at the end of the day, art is just another form of labor, so we should be siding with, waitresses and other type employees that have to put themselves on the line. And I think it's very selfish of artists to just think of, this place supports the arts, but let's not care about the waitresses. But really, it doesn't support the arts if you're firing all the people who make your food for you, and then you get like an outsourced ghost kitchen to make all your food, and it tastes 500 times worse, and has more limited options, way less nutritional content, and is way overpriced. If you run your business into the ground, you're not really supporting the arts, because you are going to go bankrupt, and you don't know how to run a business that anyone in their right mind would actually want to invest time or energy into. So that's an example of a really sad business that shot itself in the foot through just the worst possible methods. And I don't really have any sympathy for it. I think that much better choices could have been made. And I am also absolutely distraught by the state of so-called like leftists or anarchists in Denver who claim to, side with like anarchist, communist, socialist type philosophies, which I don't even necessarily ascribe to. Like, I don't really think it's all that radical to point out that you shouldn't fire all of your employees on the same day and expect to make a reliable business. But like, that's just not common sense at all from any standpoint. The same bands that I see going, let's respect workers' rights and respect queer rights and leftist all day and all of this, like, they're very outspokenly progressive, but they don't seem to want to support good local businesses that have potentially done a lot for that cause. They don't side with the union, they side with the owners, even though siding with the union is, I think, what a responsible citizen of this city should do, because it could actually create lasting change. I don't see any, like, widespread big effort to stand up for employees or anything like that. It's all a very, like, self-centered sort of everyone for themselves type mentality, and I really don't think Denver's going to be saved if everyone ignores the historic venues, tries to form new ones that maybe aren't like as accessible or as aligned as much with what a lot of Denverites know and enjoy. Like, I think if a spot like that could just stay open and keep being like a great Denver establishment that people liked and felt healthy about supporting, then that'd be cool. But as long as it acts against itself and as long as people with supposedly progressive values don't work to save it, there's really nothing that can be done. And all the venues that have cropped up that supposedly like support this type ideal don't really provide the same level of entertainment value and like quality experience. I remember when this place was owned by the previous owners, and the menu was great. There were great desserts, vegan desserts, and it was open way later. Like, it was just a much better experience from every conceivable angle, but the Denver economy is so terrible, everywhere has to close around 9 p.m., which, is a city that can't function. A city that can't just stay open till at least 10 p.m. Isn't going to work out economically. And people like this billionaire owner who bought out this cafe and then ran it into the ground systematically, it tends not to recognize that if Denver is going to save itself, it's kind of a feedback loop. If Denver is going to save itself economically, it needs to care about itself. If it doesn't, then it is just going to fall off. But he presented it in an email to me as like, we have it hard. I'd have to sell my second mansion to put a little more money into this or something. And it's like, well, you're the one buying it. If you're this irresponsible, then, that's how Denver's going to go down. If you don't actually care about the place you're buying, then just don't buy it. Let someone else buy it who does care about it. That's how I see it. But the place will probably get bulldozed or made way for a big high-rise apartment that doesn't do anyone any favors. And, everything's just becoming high-rise apartments. And I think it's completely pathetic. No city should operate like this. Even New York, there's a decent variety of businesses around. And there's just no real interest in viewing Denver as a formative environment that matters, and I think that's sad. Denver's in a very sad spot right now. I've never actually seen it this sad in my entire life.
I've actually never been. I've been to Colorado Springs, but I've never been to Denver. But I've been meaning to go, and I'm even despite what you're telling me, I'm still interested in seeing it where it's at right now.
They're very different. Colorado Springs, I've been to it, and I would say Colorado Springs. I wrote a piece once called kind of an essay. I forget how long it is, about 2,000 words. I talk about my visit to Colorado Springs, and I'd say Colorado Springs feels a lot like Pyongyang, actually, because it's the conservative city in Denver. It's the southern end. Actually, Pueblo's progressive, so Colorado Springs is unique in that regard. It's a very insular environment. It keeps to itself. It doesn't tend to make itself a big spectacle on the national stage. And it's very proud of its history, obviously. They have they have the Pioneer Museum down there. They have they have statues that go up in the middle of Main Street that are like, here's this bold pioneer that saved his entire family from freezing to death in the winter, and here's this exciting cowboy that everyone liked and was pretty cool. Here in Denver, on the other hand, it's very progressive, so we don't tend to view the history of the city, even necessarily the good parts of the history, in a favorable light. A lot of people don't even know that there is anything good about our history. We tend to engage in self-loathing a lot. And I think that's healthy. I think it's very healthy to be skeptical of history. I think it's very healthy to necessarily be skeptical about the bold pioneer myth or the great cowboy myth, because obviously it's modern times, and we know that a lot of those pioneers were stupid people, opportunists and scoundrels and the like, and the equivalent of pirates at the very least, not necessarily the most respectable crowd or anything. But I do think that Denver tends to push back against how Colorado Springs is and say, look, we're not like that, when really we are two sides of the same coin at the end of the day. We're extremely close and we're not that different. And I think that to pretend like we're not that different is a kind of denial. I think we should both just be upfront about the fact that we're, both built on land that was stolen over false promises and the like, and there's a ton of spilled blood here. And back in the 1910s, the KKK came here and was an equally active presence both here and in Colorado Springs. There wasn't really too much of a difference between us. Not that the KKK originated here, of course, so we don't really need to feel all that bad about that. It came from the South, but Denver and Colorado Springs both have equally bloody histories. The difference being that Denver tends to kind of be in denial about it. And I'm not sure how healthy that is. I think a city should be able to accept its past while also kind of accepting that it, at the very least, has a future. It shouldn't just, kill itself because it feels like it's too guilt-stricken or anything. I do think that there's a lot of positives to Denver. It's geologically stable. There's never any natural disasters of any kind here. And there's a lot of fun things to do. And it's great weather all year round and like that. But as far as Colorado Springs go, like I say, I compare it to Pyongyang because even though it is the more conservative between the two, it's not progressive at all. It has a very restrictive sort of feel. There aren't even any businesses in the downtown part that are open past 9 p.m. In Denver, there aren't really either, but that's just because they can't afford to be. But in Colorado Springs, I think it's probably because there's legislature passed that says there can't be any bars here, there can't be any late night businesses. In Denver, there at the very least are a couple that are open late, so that they can afford to be. It's not against the law to be open late or anything. But in Colorado Springs, it feels like they are. And like I say, the statues, Colorado Springs does tend to idolize its past more in a kind of mythic way. So even though it's conservative, and a lot of people would consider that a backwards type of thing, it reminds me of North Korea. I feel like whenever I go to Colorado Springs and I look at the statue of the brave pioneer with his lamplight and his wife under his arm, I feel kind of like I'm looking up at the big statues of Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un. They're like towering over everyone.
Yeah.
I feel like conservative thought has more in common with like a spot like North Korea than it really cares to admit. There's a lot of brutalist architecture down there. It's very stark and stripped down. Hadn't been updated since the 70s, so it gives off the same kind of vibes you get from like Pyongyang Square. And once I went down to Colorado Springs to interview another local band, just like the walk I made to Canyon City, and I ended up having to stay the entire night because they didn't want me to spend the night with them. So I just said, screw it, I'll walk around Colorado Springs all night. And it was really weird to be the only person walking around these empty, desolate streets at like 2 a.m. And the middle of downtown, there's some big buildings there. There's lots of shops and lots of restaurants, but absolutely nothing is happening, and there's not a single person around. And no cars either. In Denver, the cars go all night, but in Colorado Springs, they all stop around like 9 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very unsettling. So that's a difference between Denver and Colorado Springs. Part of the problem is that we tend to wash our hands of guilt too much. We have we have a superiority complex. People talk a lot about coastal elitism, and I see it, but I think Denver has its own unique variety of elitism that just springs up from being a majority leftist type city in the middle of nothing that's surrounded by a lot of conservative type thought. You got the Mormons to the west, and you got the Nebraskans to the east, you got Wyoming up above, and you got Colorado Springs down under. So but even so, Denver has like the majority of political sway in the state, and we voted blue in every election since like forever.
Mm-hmm.
So Denver does tend to have a sense of we're better than all these backwards, empty type places, or better than all that. Here's the Democratic type center. And as a leftist myself, I like that. I wouldn't want to live somewhere like Colorado Springs, where it's a little more towards the center, towards the right. I will say that I'm glad at least that there's never been a single Confederate statue here in Colorado, and I can be proud of that. There was never anything like that, because when that whole thing was going on during the middle of COVID, they did actually take down a statue of Christopher Columbus in a Civic Center park. It's gone now, and it's all fenced off. It's still fenced off, even though there's nothing there anymore. Because that was just kind of in the zeitgeist. Just let's get rid of all the statues. In Colorado Springs, obviously they didn't get rid of theirs. But the only statues that are left here in Denver there's one of a World War I guy, which, is in World War I. And then there's like in Civic Center Park, there's one cowboy and one Indian, but they're presented in a pretty realistic type light. I don't think there's anything historically inaccurate at all about them. I think that they took a lot of research to do and a lot of intricate bronze work, and I don't think they're going down anytime soon. But that was the main controversy, is there was a statue of Columbus, and that was like, we wanted to kind of do our part, even though we don't have any Confederate statues here, because Colorado didn't exist during the Civil War. That's another thing that keeps us from really connecting with American history, is we're a post-Civil War state. So other places, they can have the Civil War reenactments. They can go, wow, my grandpa was in the Battle of Gettysburg, Battle of Bull Run, and they can do all this. And here in Colorado, it's like, we didn't exist, so none of that matters to us. I do like to think, and I think it's not a very hot take, that if Colorado had existed, we would have been a Union state, but because it wasn't until, like I say, like the 1910s that there was a little bit of KKK presence around. But I think that's something that keeps us from really feeling like an American spot. Even California, obviously, was settled by the Spaniards earlier, so it was at least something back in the day. And Colorado feels like it missed out on a lot. Denver feels like it has a lot of catching up to do, and it's not sure which direction to go in. And that's very sad. And these days, the population is growing. All the people who have lived here for years and years are being forced to move out or go onto the street. And everyone who's moving in is from Texas or California or New York and doesn't know anything about the city and has no idea what went on here or anything about it, and doesn't, like I say, support unions, become involved in anything. It's all just kind of a free-for-all, everyone for themselves type deal, where everyone is expected to adopt this bizarre chimera of Texan and Californian and all the coastal attitudes and all of that. But it's a melting pot, and yeah, I think the best cities are. So I think Denver's getting more diverse by the day, but I think also people who've lived here, I think Coloradans should be a legitimate, recognized demographic as a major population center. I think people that have been here a long time deserve to be recognized as its own thing that's like valid too. Like you can say this is the Denver food, this is the Denver landmark, this is the best view of Denver, so on. I think we compare ourselves to other places too often. I think we tend to think of ourselves in terms of other places too often. I don't think that's healthy for somewhere to do. I think, like other cities, you can just say, yeah, this is us, this is what we've got going on. So.
Yeah, I know that I've heard of Denver a few times, and it always seems to me like a place that sounds also like a bit like Portland, like a place that is left-leaning.
I hear that. But I have heard that. I've heard it compared to Portland, I heard it compared to Seattle, but it's left-leaning, but it's left-leaning in a very specific way that isn't necessarily equatable to somewhere like Portland. For one, if you border a body of water, you're going to get that immediately alters the context of a given area, because you're going to see you're going to see, for one, ocean traffic, which is totally separate. Denver can't have that. Also, Portland has a deep-seated respect for art. I see so many people in Portland talk about all the great resources there are for local authors and publishers and galleries and all sorts of things. Portland is in a pretty good spot even now. I would say it's in an okay spot. I don't think anywhere is comparable to Denver. I've also heard it compared to Austin. That's not comparable.
No.
Denver is a city that I like to call it the electric city. And when I said that, someone said, "No, Scranton's the electric city." And I think Denver is extremely it's wired in somehow. I think that's a good thing to call it, is the electric city. I never call it the Mile High City, because I don't agree with that nomenclature, because to a Denverite who's lived here their whole life, it's not a mile high from anything. I think the New Yorkers and Californians and stuff tend to be pretty presumptuous when they assume that sea level should be a standard for elevation, because to someone who's just here, it's, this is zero, and then if you go lower, it's negative elevation. If you go higher up in the mountains, it's positive elevation. So I prefer to call it the electric city. That's what I'll use. I also like Queen City of the Plains. That sounds very noble and complimentary. It sounds like it's a respectful way to refer to it. Queen City's nice. I like the 303 too. That's a nice way to refer to it. Because, yeah, I've got a 303 number. So,
do you think that you feel less likely right now in the state that Denver is in to continue to try to do like in-person live things, and do you feel drawn back into the internet a bit, or do you feel like both of them have kind of, the internet and the live shows have kind of lost their sparkle for you right now?
I don't know. The internet, it's not really as good for commerce. I've sold more comics in the past 5 years locally than I ever did on the internet.
I love that.
And yeah, I've sold a lot of comics. I mean, my comics have gotten pretty decent sales.
Is that your main source of income?
Yeah, well, yeah, I wouldn't say. I'd say I make more off the comics than I ever did off the music, because mostly, like I say, I just went to open mics, and sometimes at the open mics I'd sell a couple comics at them, but it's not often I got a live show that I could like get paid for, because like I say, there's no market demand for the type music that I make. It's mostly either like very stripped back country that's very culturally appropriative in a sense of like classic blues and R&B tradition, or it's like very loud, abrasive type metal, kind of noise core type stuff that I'm not into. And those are the two popular genres around. There doesn't really seem to be a spot for new wave to get in. So my music doesn't really get picked up by like shows or anything. I've tried to make a lot of connections and get into the scene, get into as many different areas as I possibly can, but people don't really like my new wave. And I think a lot of people are probably jealous of my output, because a lot of Denver bands, even ones that are really good and I think could have a great opportunity, don't have a lot of material recorded, definitely don't have like music videos like I do, and don't really seem to want to put out like an album. There's so many bands that don't even have a single album out. It takes them like 3-4 years to get one album out, and then they probably disband after that, whereas I've got like 15. So I'd say I'm much
where do you typically put your albums? As far as like, are they all just physical media that you offer and sell? Or
they're all on Bandcamp and YouTube, the entire discography. Not on Spotify, because Spotify is too difficult to get on. Plus, Spotify doesn't even pay anything, and it's not like anyone would see it on there anyway. The market's very oversaturated on Spotify. I do know a lot of bands, a lot of local bands especially, that say like, "Why aren't you on Spotify, Nick?" And I'm like, well, because there's like just a ton of like oversaturated drivel on there. Now there's like so many fake artists and fake tracks and just like total content slop on there that it's totally unusable, and it pays pennies a month. So yeah, not that. In terms of making my music accessible though via the internet, like yeah, of course I'll do that. So my music's on Bandcamp, YouTube. Bandcamp's a little easier because you can see the entire chronology from all the way back from like 2020 to now, and it's like 15 years. Well, not 15 years, but like 20 albums or so, and including like rarities and extras and stuff. And then mostly I try and sell my albums on tape, which I think is a great format. It's very reliable, and it's really good for length in terms of portability. And I think that I've sold some tapes over the years. About half people I've run into say they have a means of playing tape. Tape is much cheaper and more accessible to get into than vinyl. A lot of people don't know that, but it is. And I record them myself on my Sony TCWE type tape deck.
So
double-decker tape deck.
Yeah, I'm looking at your YouTube right now, and I clicked on like the most recent video and about on your YouTube page, and I still can't find a Bandcamp link. And then when I went to your your website, and I'm like scrolling down, I'm still not seeing a Bandcamp.
Well, if you search Nicholas Cicada on Google, it's like the first result. It gets a lot of traffic.
Well, I would suggest I would make a slight suggestion, which is to put your Bandcamp link on your, at least on your like about section of your YouTube, so that people who might see. That's
a pretty good idea, I guess.
Because I would definitely have liked to know where to. You don't want to make it too hard to find your stuff.
Bandcamp does say that the audio files they accept, like WAV and FLAC, are of higher quality than an MP3. I don't know if I necessarily buy into that. I have noticed ever since YouTube changed it so that the About tab is only accessible by clicking instead of on the end of the row of features on top of the videos, which I do remember, because I notice whenever YouTube makes an update that not as many people seem to go to my website anymore. So I don't know if links on the About tab actually do anything.
Can it be part of your
change at YouTube?
Can it be some part of like the info section of your videos in general? Like I'm not sure how. I mean, I don't use YouTube, so I don't really know exactly how it works. But I just know that sometimes when I go to a YouTube video, it'll have like every video that someone will upload will have like a list of like, here's my Discord, here's my Twitter, here's my whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works exactly, but it would probably be helpful.
I haven't had the Discord for a good while, so aside from that, the Bandcamp's about the only other link I even have. But I do upload all my music to both. So on YouTube, they can really just listen to the music on YouTube. Like I say, Bandcamp does say that the audio quality is a little bit higher on Bandcamp, but I don't know if I necessarily buy that, and I think that it does sometimes seem to be a little bit quieter on YouTube for whatever reason. Probably something to do with the upload process. I'm not sure.
But all the music you've made is on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, all of it.
Okay.
Yeah, every album, even the less easy to find ones. Actually, there's some rarities on YouTube that aren't on Bandcamp at all. There's some just one-off type songs and videos, and some like extras, some demos, and like that.
Okay.
At any rate, I like tape because no one else in Denver, at least as far as I know, puts out as many tapes as I do. I got my own tape deck, so that's a good resource to have. I record my own tapes. I make sure that they have the proper audio quality, that they're synced up, and they have a nice, rich sound to them. My tape deck is just like my keyboard. It's from it's from 1992, so it's from the point when tape decks were very high quality. And I sell them for about, what's the current going rate? About $10 a pop. And like I say, I also put them in the Nicholas Comics catalog for anyone who wants audio. I'm not sure exactly how. Like, obviously, you can't send them in an envelope like you can with comics, so that's kind of the disadvantage. You have to buy a special type, small padded envelope. But, yeah, I sell my music on tape.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, I think one of the things about what you do is it seems very authentically you. Like, I believe, I very much believe that what you're doing represents who you are. I think people would be surprised that I would enjoy kind of like the some of the new wave stuff, because the stuff that I make is very different. But ultimately, I love when I see somebody doing something that seems like the freest version of their true selves. And I definitely see that in all of your creative output. So you have a unique vantage point, you have a unique viewpoint. You're obviously incredibly intelligent and well-spoken, and you have a lot of interesting ideas and opinions on things. And so I don't want you to get discouraged by how long it takes to get to where you want to go. You know, it's like you can see in your mind the way Denver should be, and it's frustrating to not have Denver just be that way. And so then you have to be very, you know, it's frustrating to have to watch its kind of decay and then not know exactly how it's going to rebuild itself. But if you're committed to being a part of that change, then I do have hope for Denver. And it'll be interesting to see where that goes in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I have confidence that it will turn out all right. I'm not sure why Denver can't get a hold of itself. It seems like it just doesn't want to sometimes. It's systemic factors, like you say. It's factors that are beyond the scope of any one type person. And now that I've kind of been rejected from Denver music scene, and people have been very hostile towards me, I've kind of been in a bad spot. Also, to any listeners out there, I went to the heart doctor today, and they say that about 1/4 of the time my heart has extra beats, which isn't good. My blood pressure is too high, so I might have to stop overexerting myself. I think it's definitely good that I'm going to be staying inside, away from so much sexual or violent behavior, and I'll be just putting out more comics, kind of going back to what I enjoy to begin with. Not that I don't enjoy music too, but comics are the first thing I ever got into.
Sure, and I think it's okay to take a break from things that don't feel safe anymore for you. Like, it's totally fine to say, this doesn't feel safe anymore, so I'm going to rest, and you can still create, you can still make things, you can still express yourself, you can still be heard, but you can do it in a way that feels safer for you right now. Yeah,
I think I've kind of gone up against the limit, and it's interesting. I've never really been like this before. I don't really experience burnout, but I do face a great degree of existential dread because I tend to overthink things. So,
well, I think that's why I wanted to be a sounding board a little bit. Like, I'm very interested in your ideas and your opinions on things, but I think it is useful to also have, if necessary, time and again, you know, sometimes to have some feedback or conversation about what you're thinking. So far, I mean, everything you've said today, there's not been anything that I have anything really to like add, because I don't know Denver and I haven't been to Denver. So it's really just sort of like listening and learning about Denver from you. But I think that if you're interested over time, I think this could be a useful avenue for you to talk about the things that are going on, and then if I have something to add, if it's about a topic that I have some experience with, then I think it could be useful to have that sort of additional thought.
Yeah. I like I say, I don't get too much outside perspective. It's interesting. It seems like everyone around has a lot of different perspectives to fall back on. I don't know if they necessarily do. I think a lot of them probably just kind of pretend to be open to a lot of different perspectives. I notice that there's not too many demographics locally that tend to like mix with each other or try and see things from another demographic's point of view. And I've been to all types of different shows with all types of different demographics. I've tried to expose myself to every single genre and type clique possible in order to get as wide a viewpoint of what's going on in Denver as I possibly can. What I notice is a lot of these type people who claim to be very open and to different type perspectives and learning and growing, they don't tend to go outside their comfort zone much. The people who listen to the metal songs don't tend to listen to too much of the hip hop songs. The ones who listen to, say, the country type songs don't tend to go to the metal type songs. And I get that everyone has their own like preference, but it's very insular. It feels like a lot of people are caught up in a very limited sort of purview, or they only have a very limited knowledge of a given sort of music and don't tend to expand beyond that or try some kind of new thing that could potentially give them a new type sound or a new type experience. And I think that's a shame. So
it is, but I think that's one of the things that makes you unique and something that made me interested in what you're doing. You're not the only person who is curious and open-minded, but it is rare and difficult to do that because it is it's difficult to want to listen to a different perspective or and not just listen, but like actually be interested in why people like a certain thing or whatnot, because people tend to like to cloister into groups, and that makes them feel safe, I think, to say, well, I'm a part of this thing, and if they listen to an alternate perspective, then it kind of threatens their group identity, I guess, maybe, but
yeah, that's what it is. Here in Denver, as an asexual, I don't feel that there's any prominent asexual group. I feel that people who defy gender norms don't tend to consider that people who defy relationship type norms are also queer. And I think, that's very much true. I don't really see too much of a diverse type spectrum here in Denver. As far as
I don't really see that. Yeah, I don't see that anywhere. Like, I've been in a number of queer spaces in a number of different cities, and I don't see a lot of asexual like discussion or representation within queer spaces.
Well, that's good to know that at least it's not a Denver specific thing.
It's not.
I probably figured it wasn't, but I think
I think I see a lot more discussion about asexuality maybe online, but I think typically speaking, the asexual people that I know are actually mostly offline, and they're mostly independent, and I wouldn't say solitary, but they feel very comfortable with themselves, and they feel very comfortable like having their own alone time, and so they're going to be less likely to be a part of groups, I think, in general. So of course you're not going to see like a group of asexuals looking for like more more people.
I've realized that through 5 years of trying to branch out, I've realized that I really don't. I could use maybe 1-2 asexual friends. I don't think.
Right.
I tried starting like an all asexual band because there's a lot of all trans bands here, and I thought, well, let's get some representation going as far as asexuals go.
Yeah.
And I thought, I can make some friends and play some music with them. Not only does nobody play new wave around here, there's no real demand for it. I'm not sure exactly why there's a stigma around new wave. I think a lot of people have a very surface level understanding of it, or dismiss it as too commercial or outdated or whatever, and don't listen to it on a consistent, frequent type basis. But I think a lot of people view the idea of something that's just for asexuals as like an affront to them, and this is equally the case in both the queer spaces and the cis or straight spaces that I've been in. Is everyone is universally offended by my inability to experience romantic or sexual attraction. Everyone assumes that I have it out for them, and that I dislike their sex in particular. Like I dislike that. What I've noticed is like everyone is equally capable of romantic and sexual tension and these sorts of things. There's no noticeable difference in the level of suspicion or jealousy or anything that people will feel, no matter the gender identity, sexual orientation. Everyone who experiences these sorts of things will get jealous that I talk to their girlfriend or get jealous that I talk to their boyfriend. And it's a real hassle as someone who legitimately values art over sex, that I have to convince people that I do value art over sex, but I do. And that's something basically nobody does. I tried to start
very
an
odd.
asexual band. Yeah, I tried to start an asexual band, and people got upset. They viewed it as an affront to themselves that I would try and foster an all-asexual type space where people could just talk about their asexuality and make music with me, and you could have, a good time.
Can you tell me how you knew that that's how they felt? Or, like, did somebody, like, how did you, because you're saying that you wanted to start this thing, and maybe did you reach out to some asexual people you knew and they rejected it?
No, because I don't know any asexual people, because they're all in the closet here in Denver. It doesn't tend to be like a thing that people are open about or want to be proud of or anything, and I think that's very sad. I
think it's also a really, really significant minority. Like, there's just a very, very small amount of asexual people. I think I tend, and I want to tell you this because I think that you might wonder, like, well, if I'm asexual, then how do I fit into this society? Like, when it's so unbelievably different than that. And what I would say is that I am not asexual, but my absolute closest friends all are, like, all of them. And one of the reasons why I went out of my way to select them and invest in them, and I mean, these are have been my friends for decades, and one of the reasons why I invested in them was because they made me know that I was safe, because I had sexual assault history, and I knew that I was never going to have to worry about that ever with them. It was like the 100% certainty that they were going to actually be friends with me, they were actually going to care for me, and not to mention that, like, their ability to be rational and calm, their ability to have emotional self-control was actually higher than anybody that I knew that was not asexual as well. So asexuality is, in my opinion, though I am not asexual myself, I view it as like almost like a higher ascended level of of being than where I'm at. Like, I'm almost envious of that ability for them. And so there's, like, you don't necessarily have to feel like the only people who are ever going to value you as an asexual person are other asexual people, because there may be other reasons why you would be an incredibly valuable friend, because not everyone actually, even people who have sexual desire or attraction to people, like, we don't always want that to be a factor in our relationships. So it's but it is an incredible minority. Over the course of my life, I met one in high school, I met one in grad school, I met one when I first started working and when I moved to North Carolina, and I met one. Is that right? Yeah. So it's like one every, like, 7 years, and I spent it's rare. It's very, very rare.
Yeah, Google tends to give inconsistent results. One says it's 0.1%. One says it's 1%, which I think is about the same as trans people. That's 1%. I know that's not the case. Or if it is, like I say, a lot of asexuals must be really in the closet, but I'm pretty sure the 0.1% statistic is probably more likely. I've been in so many queer spaces over the past 5 years, and Denver's a city of about 700,000, so if it's 1%, then that'd be 7,000 people, and even if it was only 0.1, that'd still be 700 asexuals. But I don't think any of them go to these queer spaces because, it's very much like
I mean, I have found some queer spaces to be hypersexual, actually.
Yeah, that's the case. That's the case. Yeah. I wouldn't say that they are any more sexual than the straight spaces, but the straight spaces tend to be a lot more secure and upfront about it, and aren't necessarily worried about like potentially anything because they feel that they have the right to be hypersexual. I would say that there are a lot of people who assume that the same things that like are useful to them would necessarily be to me. Like someone, for instance, told me, wow, this new burlesque club is really going to be a great resource for local art, Nick. And well, I was, and they said specifically, this will be great for us. And I was like, for me, I can't get naked on stage, so it's not like this is going to, be economically viable for me or anything. I don't care about taking my clothes off, and I don't even know how to appreciate the naked human form in any capacity. So,
is it possible that the burlesque club mostly is going to do burlesque, but occasionally is going to just do like open mic music and art or something? Were they actually suggesting to you to do burlesque?
Yeah, it's entirely just like the total strip show that everyone in the crowd goes wow, and I don't know when to go wow because I don't understand what even the appeal is of that. I like plays. I like if it's like something like Waiting for Godot or something.
Right.
I like that, and I could be in that, or I could at the very least watch it and kind of enjoy it. But I can't really just enjoy a show where the whole appeal is just to see someone naked, and that's not necessarily ace accessible. So I like I say, variety open mics where there's a lot of different stuff, and I've seen open mics where there's poems and music and plenty of non-sexual stuff, and also plenty of sexual stuff, but it mixes it up and it keeps a nice variety, and there's a variety to it. I would say that I wouldn't say that queer people are more into sex than straight people. That's a common stereotype. As an asexual who's basically alienated by all types of sex, I'd say that it's about equal across the board. I would say that, like, I've seen straight cishet type spots that aren't necessarily as maybe honest with themselves about the sexual nature of what they've got going on, but it is, and I noticed that obviously. I would say that there are no resources locally for asexuals. There's no sense of solidarity between asexuals, and I've tried to make friends both with asexuals and with people who aren't asexual. But more often than not, I find that I can't be friends with both people and a couple at once because I'm constantly aware of what's going on between them. And it's not always fun. Like, there's a lot of fighting and a lot of stress that I absorb, and that tends to not be fun. And then it's very rare that someone will, like, necessarily voluntarily stop having sex, and I would not in any way presume to stop that or anything. It's just hard to know someone for whom that isn't a part of their life at all, to which I can absolutely relate. I could relate to that. I think that people should, if people want to have sex, go for it. I just can't relate to that at all. And like you say,
I don't think you need to. Like, I don't think you need to relate to it. Like, it's not. There are many things about a person that you will not necessarily connect with, and that's not going to be the only thing. But I know that especially at your age, that's going to be a particularly hard challenge because you're in early 20s. People are. That's just like the number one thing that people are thinking about, and it's all relationships and it's dating, and people are getting engaged and thinking about having babies and yada yada, and that does go on for a while, but it does also slow down, and you know that. Like I've heard you mention before, you're like, well, maybe when we're all 40, people will start calming down a bit.
I don't know about Gen Z. I think there are unique pressures on Gen Z that give Gen Z a uniquely neurotic type affect. I think that Gen Z has a lot of attributes that previous generations did not, and I do worry about that, but I do assume that eventually Gen Z will calm down a bit and focus more on art or stuff, or maybe become a little more nuanced or slightly more like, interested in the past specifically. Gen Z seems to have no interest in like appreciating all the art of the past, which is a real waste because the 20th century was one of the best. It hands down, I would say the best 100 years of art that the world has ever produced, and we seem to not consume too much of it. We seem to just kind of take it for granted and ignore it. I would also say that Gen Z tends to be uniquely neurotic because we're aware of all the systemic factors going on around us, and this tends to cause us to question free will a lot of the time. We tend to be very angsty about whether something is our choice or not, or whether it's so-and-so system doing it. Back in the 90s, it was assumed that the inception of the internet would make all the information free. Everyone thought, wow, that'll be so great that everyone can check facts and understand how the world works at the push of a button. But it also makes like every government scandal that's ever been committed accessible at the push of a button, every single atrocity that's ever been committed. Right. So everyone's extremely insecure, and everyone just assumes that they have to distance themselves from the human species as much as possible, and I think that's a shame. I think people tend to fall into a total algorithmic spiral, which I wouldn't say I necessarily have. I've spent 5 years trying to avoid the internet and try and branch out in the real world, and I've found that people in the real world are every bit as obsessed with conspiracy theories or just total, like, absolutely meaningless stuff that no one in, say, the past would necessarily care about. People really do get invested in stuff that overall is not that big a deal, and I think that's a shame. So I do think Gen Z has some unique challenges there. Gen Z has too much perspective. That's what Season 2 of Hypnagogic Archive is going to be about, an overload of perspective. An awareness that's fundamentally too high for the current state of human evolution. I think we're really overtaxing ourselves. I think that's a shame. Like you say, if you think that being immune from sexual or romantic tension is necessarily like something to be envious of, it does make, at least at this point, and very probably in the future too, very, very difficult to relate to anyone in any capacity. I don't know if I could relate to another asexual. I might not be able to. But
it depends. Yeah. It depends on what your interest. So I mean, that right now it seems like that's like the primary interest of a lot of people in your age range or the people who you've spent time with, and so it was hard to connect on other levels because that one was always overpowering everything else. But that is not the case for everyone, and that's one of the hardest things to do in life, is to not assume that the experiences that you've had are indicative of the experiences you will have. That it runs completely counter to our kind of evolutionary safety measures in our own brain. Like, our brain is trying to say, if this has happened, okay, then I've learned an important lesson, so I can make sure it doesn't happen again. But unfortunately, it's with social things, it just doesn't work like that. You can have an absolutely horrible experience with someone or in a situation and then never have that experience again. Or you could have great experiences and then have horrible. So unfortunately, like, you can't really you can't really take the experiences you've had and be able to extrapolate from there and say, like, okay, so now I've learned something important, and I won't do X, Y, and Z. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I'm not going to avoid all social interactions in the future. I think I've made at least some connections which are slightly valuable, and I'd like to keep them open for as long as possible. But I would say that information tends to spread a lot faster. And keep in mind, this information, these negative rumors about me, are being spread by people who don't necessarily even invest themselves in music or in arts or anything to a large degree.
Well, what do you mean about the rumors or things being spread? Like,
well, like for instance, obviously, like I say, everyone assumes that as an asexual, especially like an open and out one, I have some kind of hidden sexual intent or something. I don't.
Oh, they just don't believe that you really exist. Yeah. So
yeah.
I've experienced something very similar. Like I don't really talk about like what I would consider my sexual orientation, but like I have felt attraction for all sorts of different genders of people. But then a lot of people misconstrue that as like, if that's true about someone, then maybe they have sexual attraction to everyone. Like literally every single person that they ever see.
Oh.
Which is not at all accurate either.
In my case, it's that, it's external perception. People don't think I exist. People can't seem to accept that someone could live a happier, fulfilling life without ever having sex with anyone. People, especially like you say in the early 20s, people don't seem to understand that, and this is something that's true, but people don't seem to recognize it, that accusing me of sexual intent is invalidating an intrinsic factor of my being. That's as offensive to me as if I invalidated someone's gender identity or sexual orientation.
Absolutely, 100%.
But they don't tend to consider anything from the asexual perspective,
because it's completely foreign to. I mean, it's in the same way that you cannot possibly understand why somebody would want to look at some like random person naked during a burlesque show, right? Like that seems completely ludicrous to you, like a waste of time and also just stupid and gross, right? Like that's your perspective on what's going on. Similarly, because you can't understand why somebody would feel that way, other people often cannot understand the flip side of that, the idea that you would not feel any interest or not feel any attraction or not feel any whatever. Like they can't understand that because it's not at all their personal experience. So that's that's unfortunate.
Qualia is terrifying in that communication cannot adequately bridge it. Communication is a useful tool in many areas of life, but it can't compensate for qualia. And like I say, I think I could probably relate to an asexual person, but like you say, they might not want to be related to.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, the people who I love, it will be interesting to see if they, like, I'll talk to them and see if they have any interest in having, if we want to have like an episode that's just about the asexual experience. I think it would be useful if I can get them on the call, because they can speak to it in a way that I cannot, because obviously it's I can speak to like how it's how it is beneficial to my life to have asexual people in it, but I can't speak to what it feels like to be asexual, and they could. But like I said, a lot of the asexual people that I know are so kind of able to confidently exist in their own space, in their own bubble, to some extent, that they have no desire in particular to like be a part of a group per se, or like a movement. But on the other hand, I think that they would very much relate to having this discussion. So I will definitely be like reaching out to see if they have any interest in just being on a call like this to discuss what it's been like for them in their life. Because I think that what I can tell you too is that they are not living lives of like sad desperation or it's not like that at all. Like they live very happy lives with friendship, like meaningful connection with people, meaningful relationships with people, meaningful care and concern and collaboration on things. Like they have meaningful work.
That speaks to a level of internal strength that I hope to achieve someday.
You will.
Like I say,
you will.
It's probably the context of being in Denver. Denver has unique pressures and forces at work here, and part of it probably is that I went into music specifically because everyone told me to make friends when I was here on the internet 5 years back. Everyone said, make friends out in Denver. And I've tried that. And the response I've got is about the same from I got back in Reddit back in the day. It's, we don't like your art. Your art's too different, so on. And it's bizarre. I think
just because something is not initially popular doesn't mean that it's not.
Yeah, I think that in time...
The whole point of something being groundbreaking is that nobody's done it yet. So, like, when you're out in the scene in Denver...
I think that in time, I'll probably be appreciated a great deal, so long as I stay here, so long as I put it in and I keep going.
Right.
But at the same time, I do feel that I'm very imbalanced, and I do tend to overexert myself too much, and that's partly market factors at work. I see a very successful band, and I want to be like that. I want to get into a nice successful area, and I want to communicate my idea good in that area. I probably can't because it's just not in demand. Asexual music is not popular. New wave isn't popular. Asexual new wave together is even less popular.
That's
so.
No. I'm telling you that please. I hope that you hear me eventually one day. If you can't hear me now, that you'll hear someday. This will sink in. But the things that make you different, the things that people are going, what is that? I don't know what that is. I don't like that. That's awesome. That means that you're doing something that nobody else has done yet. And I'm going to go back to Matt Farley for a minute just to say, because he's very inspirational to me and a friend of mine. And one of the reasons why I think so highly of him, besides the fact that he's done a very creative and free he's created a very free and interesting and unique life for himself. But he did this for years and years and years with absolutely no interest, no payback, no nothing. He probably put out 15,000 songs before it actually made enough money for him to be able to think about not having a date. He had a job where he was at a youth home. He was an overnight kind of watch person, just make sure that the kids were all right in some youth home overnights. And he worked 3 or 4 days a week overnight. And then the whole rest of his time, he was doing what he loved, which was just churning out songs, just churning and churning and churning. And now, all these years later, he's making well over 6 figures. Everybody thinks he's not everybody obviously, but he's had a New York Times article written about him, and he's been on the Tonight Show and whatever. And everybody looks at that now and says, oh wow, what a genius, he did all this great stuff, blah blah blah. And I'm do you realize how many years he had to do that and believe in himself when nobody else gave a shit? And actually told him, family, friends, whoever, what are you doing with your life? What a profound waste of time. This is a crazy thing that you're doing. You are, nobody cares. It's not working. You're not succeeding. You're just wasting your life. And he didn't believe that about himself. And he loved what he was doing, so he kept doing it. Eventually it paid off. And that's what I like, when I saw what you're doing, I thought, I really hope that the world doesn't convince you that what you're doing isn't valuable only because they don't get it yet. Like, it just, you have to be patient. It just takes people a long time to get it.
Yeah, the world can't convince me to do that because, like I say, a lot of stuff that other people necessarily consider appealing, like sex or money, I don't necessarily consider appealing. Like I say, I go to open mics just to play music. I don't go to get paid. I just want to, I want to practice on my keyboard, and it's a fun time. So, yeah, I wouldn't say money's necessarily a motivator. Sex absolutely is not a motivator as far as I see it, and, like, a lot of the things that motivate other people to succeed in the industry don't really motivate me. All that motivates me is creating the highest quality possible art that it'll find whoever it's supposed to.
Yes, exactly, 100% that.
Yeah,
but it's okay to rest too. It sounds like you've been through the ringer, and I think
that Denver's a somewhat hostile environment right now. I don't think it will be forever, certainly. I think that there are systemic factors at work, and it being election seasonal and the economy being in the gutter, that contribute to a particularly sour period for Denver right now. But I've seen Denver at a better point in time, and I think it can get back to that if it tries. It just has to try, and it has to believe in itself, just like I have to believe in myself.
Right. 100%.
I think
100%.
It just needs to believe in itself.
To rest. To rest. It sounds like you need a little bit of rest.
I can't really stop making art as it is, though, because it's really all that provides my life with any sort of meaning.
That's wonderful. That's and what you're doing, that's wonderful. But obviously, there has to be some balance. That's not going to look the same for you as it would for other people. Like when they talk about work-life balance, that's a whole other universe than what your universe is. But certainly, like, for you to be able to create the amount and quality of work that you want to, you still have to, like, be able to get a reasonable amount of sleep, like be drinking water, be able to, eat regularly, like some of those things, because it sounds like your physical health is kind of suffering right now.
I don't think it's not the art I've been making that got my physical health bad. It was when I draw comics, I actually feel extremely healthy because it's quiet and well, like I said at the beginning, comics and music are stressful in different sorts of ways to different people. Music might be really easy for someone. Like if someone's can go in front of a stadium of 100,000 people, especially if they don't only absorb the negative emotions of people. I don't really absorb the positive, fun type emotions that people have when, like, for instance, they talk about their boyfriend. I can only absorb sad stuff and, like, provide empathy, try and be a supportive friend and all that. But I tend to serve as sort of a trauma sponge, a thankless trauma sponge. And in music especially, where there's a lot of people who are attached to the limit and going around and touring and going crazy at it, it's a very exerting medium. It's a more accessible medium than comics, but it's a very overexerting medium. Gotcha. To make comics, you have to have an extremely clear and calm type of psyche. And I don't feel like I've had that, certainly for a while. Where you can sit down and really apply yourself to a page. So, and it absolutely wasn't sleep or water that contributed to these art problems I'm currently having. It's just some very mean, disingenuous people who don't like me, and I
can't make them like me, and they're not going to like me, and that's fine.
Do you have to have contact with them?
No, I don't have to have contact with them. It just happens
Okay.
that they're extremely popular and influential in the music sphere.
Okay.
And, they're going to do what they're going to do, but I can't stop. I can't stop expressing myself altogether. That's not emotionally healthy at all. So I'm going to write and I'm going to draw and,
Awesome.
yeah. That's what I think brought on this recent hurt stuff. Not
Okay.
like, I eat good, I walk a good deal, I get plenty of sun. As far
It's
as
just
that
people.
goes,
It's like it sounds like you need to like have some better boundaries for yourself around people.
yeah, exactly. I never considered that. Well, I've always kind of known that I experience platonic attraction as much as someone else would experience romantic attraction, but I've never had a very good sense of boundaries. I never realized why they're necessary. Now I realize why they're necessary. I understand why someone would put them up, because it can be taxing. And I feel
Right.
like these past couple years, I've tried to be the best possible friend to people, and they take me for granted and use me and exploit my talent for as long as they can get away with without paying me, and then toss me aside when it's convenient.
Right.
That happens a lot with asexuals. You assume that because you don't have sex, you can just kind of use them, and they're not people, and they don't have like systems inside them that have to regulate themselves and balance and all that. I hear a lot that asexual people don't need friends or contact, or or robots or
Who said
whatever.
that? Who told you that? Or where did you see that?
Mostly I would say the queer crowd, although I definitely have heard as much, maybe like 33% as much from the straight crowd. It's pretty common.
When you say that, do you mean like you had a conversation with someone and they said that to you, or you read it somewhere?
No, a direct conversation where people say stuff like that to me.
That
Actually,
is
multiple
insane.
conversations where people
That is
say
insane.
stuff like that to me.
I'm so
Well,
sorry.
it's because
That's
as an out and
insane.
proud asexual, I guess that's just not a very common thing. And another problem is, obviously I've assumed that what works for one group will work for my group, so I assume there's a lot of all straight bands and all this band and bands that try and curate their image a certain sort of way, so let's have an all asexual band. And some people just don't like that, and I think that's a shame. That
Yeah,
people
because it
can't
sounds
kind
like
of-
like the people you've been around have found asexuality to be threatening to their sexuality somehow. Like you've made
I
a
think
choice,
that-
and then they feel like you're. I don't know. Like I can't figure out why. Unless
Yeah,
they
I
felt
think that-
attacked. Like, do you think they felt attacked somehow?
I think that, yeah, I mean, like you say, asexuality is extremely rare, and you only meet so many. But every single person I've spoken to says that they have, like, multiple tons of asexual friends. And I know that this is basically statistically impossible, because,
Right.
like I say, Denver's not the biggest city, and there are no other major population centers that people could get all their asexual friends in. But I think people want to say that they have a lot of asexual friends specifically so that they can kind of sidestep the issue of asephobia locally that exists, which I think it's important.
So they're
to-
telling
to-
you that they have
say
asexual friends, but also that asexuals don't need friends. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, basically. I say, well, who's your asexual friend? Because I've never met them. I've never been to a show or anything where, like, someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, you're ace. That's cool. I'm ace too." It's never happened, and I feel like a lot of ace people
like they feel like they have to be in some kind of relationship that they don't like and that really does nothing for them, which I think is very sad. Or they feel like they have to, they shouldn't be open about how they feel or who they are or whatever. And I really don't feel like Denver, in terms of the climate here, really does anything to make that better, or considers the lived experience of ace people. I actually heard from someone who said, I don't care if I'm invalidating your lived experience. Like, I literally don't care. And they admit that blatantly. They don't care if they invalidate someone's lived experience. Just so long.
Well, let me just tell you that I genuinely believe that you are asexual. I genuinely believe when you say that that's how you feel, and that is exactly what your experience is. But I would also say that, like, the people that I've seen. So I have a 15, almost 16-year-old son, and watching his generation navigate gender and sexuality is completely different than my generation and the way we navigated it. And I feel like at some point, being some flavor of LGBTQ became like you had to be somewhere in there. And so I've seen a lot of folks, like, in his kind of cohort, kind of have pretty significant misunderstandings of who they are and who other people are. Like, so I wouldn't be surprised. And it's not, so it's happening here too, which is very far away from Denver. And I feel like you may have been in spaces in which people made assumptions about you based on people they knew who don't even know themselves. You know, like the asexual people that they know may not even actually be asexual. Like, they may be saying that because that's gives them a window or a door into the group, and they're not seeing anyone right now, so they can say that that's their situation or whatever. So unfortunately, like, I still think that the number of truly asexual people is incredibly rare, and I know that anytime that's true of any demographic of anything, that's going to be an incredibly difficult thing to have to, like, manage in society. So like, it's I hope that you're able to find some, like, healing space from society for a minute so that you can, like, just create your art in peace.
I'd say that when people say they have ace friends, they don't even necessarily have ace friends, much less, like, ace friends who aren't really ace. I think people want to seem as if the group is more diverse than it actually is. Actually, this is unique to Denver again. There's a tendency towards homogeneity because there's no outside perspective from any other close city. Mm-hmm. So people tend to want to make the city sound more like there's more going on than there actually is. And I feel like people don't really become asexual just to be popular. It's not popular. Like, a lot of people don't even know what it is. A lot of people don't even know what the prefix A means, which, it's like atheism. It's not a hard prefix to figure out, but people don't even know what it is. And you don't get really any advantage by being it. Most people wouldn't pretend to be asexual because obviously you'd have to pretend not to experience sexual attraction, which is very difficult to do and not even particularly advantageous. I can't say I've ever seen anyone who pretend, like, it's not a popular thing to pretend to be. Not even necessarily that here in Denver you have to be LGBT to be popular. Like I say, there's a very successful and popular straight cishet type space all unto itself that's like its own thing, and no one in there says, "Oh, we've got to be LGBT to get ahead." Like, they don't have to. But if someone does, then I don't know what orientation it would be necessarily that they'd pretend, but it probably wouldn't be asexual. And I think, yeah, I don't think that would probably happen. So what I think it probably is people are just kind of saying they have an asexual friend. Just to say to me, you know, oh, you're too open about your asexuality. You're the different type of asexual. Don't you want to be this conformist type asexual that just stays in your box and doesn't complain about the systemic factors that worry you, and you know, just pretend like everything's all right? Because my asexual friend does, but I don't think there is any asexual friend. I think that people tend to. I think the people tend to gravitate towards the people that are in their group, and I don't necessarily think. Well, like you say, it takes some maturity and a lot of stuff to happen before you recognize the value of a completely platonic friend that can just provide you with emotional support, which is what I've tried to do. And I don't think anyone necessarily is capable of appreciating that in my age range.
I mean, and I don't think I necessarily would have been able to appreciate it when I was 21 either.
Yeah.
It wasn't until, unfortunately, much later that I started to, after I had enough experiences in the non-asexual world to be able to understand the value of people who would not even have that on their radar. So yeah, unfortunately, it sucks to be, to be your age. And I don't think it's just a Gen Z thing, but I could also see how there are very new elements to life as a young person that my generation definitely did not have to wrestle with until we were a little bit older. So
yeah, I'm getting to be 21 or 22 at this point, so I'm not exactly the youngest potato in the bunch anymore. But I would say that I would say that not necessarily that it's difficult to grapple with gender or sex issues, but that it can be difficult when all of the issues you hear about all the time are completely different from whatever you're going through.
Right.
And I don't necessarily think that it does make any sense for me to have friends who have like issues that I can't really get, like gender dysphoria or whatever. I've never had. I always feel completely male. I just don't care about sex any.
Well, it's got to be infuriating to have people, like, especially if you said you've dealt with people who've had, like, relationship dysfunction. It's got to be infuriating for you to have to just, like, listen to it, because it's like, for you would just think the logical thing would just don't be together. Like, why are you spending time fighting or having these issues? Just don't do any of this, like.
Well, yeah, I would say that there's a cycle of abuse that's systemic. I think a lot of people might be asexual and not really know it, and you kind of feel like that's a death sentence or something, or it's terrible, and feel an immense amount of guilt over it. But as far as like that goes, I do try and say, well, I'm here. We could be friends, and maybe you might even enjoy being friends with me more than having sex. That's unlikely, but I've tried that. And, I don't expect it to happen, and it never has happened that someone would legitimately just enjoy being pals, but I've tried it.
It hasn't happened yet, but you have, I'm telling you, you have so much to offer. And, as a human being, you do not have to offer sexual experience to have value at all to anyone.
I mean, art is of value, but very few people recognize that. Friendship is of value, but very few people recognize that, and I think that's
They
sad.
will recognize it more in time, and there are people out there who value that. So I think in our I'll be in touch about right now. My thought is one of my best friends who I met in grad school, Jeff, is asexual and lives a fulfilling life, but also has seen a lot of your work and been 100% agree, definitely experienced that, definitely had to put up with that. And so I think it would be interesting to hear his perspective, since all I can do is sort of see it from an outside perspective, but he would know what it was like from his perspective, which would be a lot closer to yours. So I will definitely be in touch about when we could all be on a call together, because I think it would be really interesting to hear both of you be able to express, and he'll be able to explain what it was like 20 years ago and whether that's changed or is the same from what you're experiencing
20 years ago, asexuality was considered new. Pretty sure it was around 2000 that the term was even coined. Because up to that point, nobody really considered that not having sex could be an experience in and of itself.
Right.
I would say that, mainly, I'm not sure that having an asexual friend would necessarily be any more fulfilling than having an allosexual friend. Mm-hmm. And I certainly don't want to blame anyone who has relationships and then it just keeps sucking and sucking and they never choose just a platonic time with me. But people are very subject to suspicion and jealousy and tension and all sorts of things that just don't happen in my case. And that can get completely confusing. And barely anybody just recognizes that I'm not attracted to them, and basically everyone my age considers sex to be a desirable commodity. And I think sex generally should not be treated as a commodity. I think that that's not so good for the state of any relationship. I think that if all you can do is have sex, if there's no love in it, I think that I think that all too often sex is treated like some kind of like it's basically treated like a currency. And I have heard from girls who say that their boyfriend, insists that they go at it, and they don't really even want to. They don't necessarily want to. And I think that's sad that like a boyfriend couldn't just see a girl and go, oh, she's cool, just on her own terms.
Yeah.
I think that's a shame.
That sounds like a obviously like very dysfunctional situation and a dysfunctional relationship.
Yeah.
Certainly not every relationship is like that, but you're going to find a lot of those, especially the younger you are, because you don't have the experiences yet to be able to know how to tell the difference between somebody who's caring about you and somebody who's trying to get something out of you.
Well, specifically in Denver, too. Back in the day, Denver was, it had a lot more openly visible prostitution. There used to be strip clubs and brothels all over. Those have all closed down, but it's all kind of gone underground. But I still imagine that there's a lot of that going on here in Denver. And obviously,
I didn't know that. So prostitution is legal in Denver, or no?
It's technically illegal. I mean, ever since the brothels closed down, it's designed to give Denver a much more, family-friendly, open charm. Also, because the internet, that facilitates sex work a lot easier. Prostitution's technically illegal, but it goes on all the time. I'm sure of it. And I've talked with a lot of sex workers, and I've even stood up to one or two pimps, and that was like a very
How in God's name did that
experience.
end up? How did you end up talking or being in that universe at all?
Well, I would say that I don't know. I guess in terms of sex workers, the way I see it, and this is probably a very distorted way of viewing it, is paid sex is some of the only sex that I legitimately don't feel uncomfortable talking about or being around, because I understand that it's just a paid thing. I don't understand why someone would have sex for free, because to me it sounds rather unpleasant and traumatic, but in terms of being paid for it, like, I get why someone would have it and then get money for it, but I don't really understand why someone would have it and not get money for it.
No, I just meant, like, how did you end up in, like hanging out with sex workers and pimps?
Well, like I say, I think Denver just has a very high percentage of that, higher than other places, and it's all kept completely under the table, and people don't readily admit that. But it is
like you were just
big
like on a
thing
walk,
here
like
that
you were
goes
just
on.
you were just walking around and like met some, or are you going to like where were you spending time?
Just out on the street, Colfax, which is the main street in Denver. You don't necessarily see prostitutes in person as often as you would like back in the 90s, for instance. But the older ones certainly still go out, and I mean, I've had prostitute friends who are better friends than like girlfriends who, just kind of see their boyfriend is like the best, and I like my boyfriend. I feel like a lot of prostitutes actually understand the difference between like actually enjoying sex and not really enjoying sex but being paid for it.
Again, the
and
likelihood
so
of a
friendship.
sex worker, right? The likelihood of a sex worker having been assaulted at some point in their work is high, and so they also probably would, for that reason and others, probably value a friend that they could trust that was not going to take advantage of them in that way.
Yeah, they like having a pal, and that's nice, and I'm all too happy to do that, but it does get kind of taxing sometimes to be around such an emotionally volatile type environment. But that happens here in Denver. There's a lot of that goes on, and I do think, like I've been around queer people who specifically are scared of sex workers or like anti-sex work. And I just find that strange. I feel like a lot of people who aren't asexual are strangely uncomfortable or in denial about sex, especially among my generation. They tend to deny that a lot. And I just find that strange that no one can have an open discussion about it. Especially if, like, someone's getting abused or their life might be on the line because of sex. I think that's kind of important to be honest about. And I think it's very, very important for a city to be honest and open with itself about how many prostitutes there are. And, Denver is sometimes called Minver. I've heard that nickname tossed around because there are a lot of lonely, sad guys here. And that kind of throws off the whole gender dynamic. There aren't really too many, like, really, cool, fun girls that stick around here for long periods of time. There just tends to be a lot of sad guys that just have like existential weight on them and stuff. I don't think I'm half as sad as a lot of those, but I've seen some very just like miserable people. Yeah.
Sorry, it looks like it cut out for a second.
So, anywho.
Anyway, so Denver sounds very interesting, and it sounds like it's having some struggles right now. But it sounds like for you, your plan of action right now is to just kind of like do the things that make you joyful, and then get some distance from the stuff that has kind of created some discomfort, at least physically discomforting.
Yeah, I mean, once my heart is beating extra about 1/4 of the time, that's time to change up the patterns of behavior a little bit. And like you say, it's that not necessarily all the experiences you've had can inform all your future experiences. And I think at this point, to not still be a sociable, outgoing person would be incredibly bad for me, because I've learned a lot, and I've learned a lot about how to interact with people, and the whole social world and how it goes and everything. I've definitely branched out, but
I see massive growth in you. I mean, that would happen regardless from 16 to 21. Like, that's going to happen, but like you should feel great about like where you're at. I know it feels like maybe
I've tried a lot.
Challenging.
I've tried a lot of things.
Yeah.
I've tried more than a lot of people probably have to try, and I've tried a lot of things that don't work, and I've tried a lot of things that do work, and I've been extremely exploratory and open and generally curious over the past couple of years, and I'd say it's been a rewarding thing overall for me. I think I think I'm people at the very least, if they don't like me, they know who I am, and that's cool.
Fair.
So,
I think that your mic or something is kind of like maybe breaking down a little bit because I'm hearing a lot of like fuzz on my end, or it could be mine. Okay. I don't know. It could be either way. But I think that this has been a good first chat, and I think it would be cool to talk to my friend Jeff and see what he thinks about maybe hopping on a call with us to discuss his experience.
Well, like you say, I have to coordinate so it all starts recording together. Other than that, though, certainly, okay. Cool. Well, this should be out within the week. I'll edit it together, and I find it very interesting that you remembered me after 5 years.
Oh, and you made a huge splash on so like I call it the nest, but it was like this group of kids on the Bill Wirtz Discord. It wasn't his Discord server; it was a Discord server for fans of his. But there was a group of kids in there, and I think you would have actually fit in really well with them. It was a lot of like kids just trying to find their way and making things, and when you made your stuff, it was so outside of what anybody had ever seen, and so it was absolutely, fascinating. And there was I had no idea who you were, and I made a really shit judgment right off the bat because I was like, I don't know, this guy, he clearly is not a Wirtz fan, and he's maybe he's got something wrong with him, I don't know. And I really just I regretted it then. I will always regret that. That was a stupid knee-jerk reaction to art that I didn't understand right off the bat. So that was,
Yeah, I don't know. I guess
that was my fault. But I absolutely remembered you. So when I was going back and checking on everybody, because every year or two I go back and check on folks and make sure they're okay and giving them some encouragement. And I was like, whatever happened to the guy who was making that really cool outsider art project stuff? And so I went and looked you up, of course, and was so impressed by how much you had created over these years, and seeing the more recent stuff and seeing that you had kind of hit a valley temporarily. I just thought I have to reach out to him and let him know like what you're doing. You're on the right path. You're doing great work. You are learning some really tough lessons, but they're worth learning, and there's a lot of people out there like you, but it's not, you're not in the majority, not even close. And to do what you're doing takes a lot of courage, and it's scary. When you're at the point where you're at, it's very, very scary, because it's like, where am I going with this? Is anyone ever going to care about this? Is this,
okay?
But they will. I've seen it a million times. And so I'm excited to see that same thing happen for you in time.
All right. Well, yeah, I think that's interesting.
Good. Well, you can think about that some more, and and we'll talk again. I'll be in touch, and we'll figure out the next time we're gonna have another chat.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. Okay. Well, I'll schedule it soon.